In the philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli, power was never simply about strength. It was about perception, about what people believe you are capable of even when they cannot prove it. Machiavelli observed rulers, diplomats, and nobles across the turbulent courts of Renaissance Italy. He noticed something deeply unsettling about human nature. The most powerful men were not always the most honest, the most generous, or even the most intelligent. Often, they were simply the most difficult to understand. Their intentions were hidden. Their emotions were restrained. Their thoughts remained behind a veil, and this uncertainty created fascination, because the human mind hates unanswered questions. When people fully understand you, their curiosity dies. But when something about you remains unknown, the mind begins to chase answers. It begins to analyze every word, every gesture, every silence. And this is where the first principle of Machiavellian attraction begins: controlled mystery. Most men sabotage themselves before attraction even has the chance to begin. They believe that openness will win admiration. They reveal everything about themselves within minutes: their past, their feelings, their interests, their admiration for the woman in front of them. But what they call honesty often becomes predictability. And predictability is the enemy of intrigue. Machiavelli, the author of The Prince, understood that influence thrives in uncertainty. A ruler who reveals every plan becomes vulnerable. A ruler who exposes every thought becomes easy to manipulate. So the wise ruler reveals only what is necessary. The same law governs human attraction. When a woman feels she has completely understood a man, the mystery dissolves. There is nothing left to discover, no puzzle left to solve. The psychological tension that once sparked curiosity quietly fades. But when a man reveals himself slowly, carefully, and deliberately, something unusual begins to happen. Her mind begins to work. She notices the moments when you speak with calm certainty. She notices the moments when you remain silent while others rush to fill the air with noise. She begins to wonder what you are thinking, and in that moment the dynamic shifts. You are no longer chasing her attention. Her curiosity begins chasing you. Machiavelli would say that mystery is not deception. It is restraint. It is the discipline of not revealing everything simply because you can. Observe powerful figures throughout history. They rarely explain themselves fully. Their expressions remain measured. Their words remain deliberate. This creates an aura that people struggle to interpret. And what the mind cannot interpret, it cannot easily dismiss. In attraction, this principle becomes even more powerful because curiosity and desire often grow from the same psychological root: the desire to uncover what is hidden. When a man constantly explains himself, constantly reassures, constantly expresses his admiration, he removes the need for discovery. But the man who reveals himself in fragments becomes something else entirely. He becomes a story that is still unfolding. Consider how people react to unpredictability. When someone behaves in completely predictable ways, the brain categorizes them quickly: safe, familiar, understood. But when someone behaves with calm confidence and occasional unpredictability, the brain becomes alert. It begins observing more closely, not because of fear, but because of fascination. This is why silence can be more powerful than speech. In conversations, many men rush to prove their value. They speak too quickly, laugh too eagerly, reveal too much enthusiasm. They believe this creates connection. But Machiavelli understood something darker about human psychology. The person who speaks the least often controls the atmosphere of the room, because silence forces others to react. It forces them to interpret your expression, your posture, your tone. They begin filling the silence with their own thoughts and assumptions. And the more they think about you, the deeper their attention becomes. Mystery, when controlled properly, does not create distance. It creates gravity. People begin orbiting your presence because they feel there is something more beneath the surface. Something they have not yet uncovered, something they want to understand. This is why the most intriguing men are rarely the loudest. They are rarely the ones desperately trying to impress. Instead, they observe. They speak when necessary. They reveal pieces of themselves slowly, like chapters of a book that cannot be rushed. Each conversation leaves something unanswered. Each interaction leaves a small trace of curiosity. And curiosity is one of the most powerful emotional hooks in human psychology. Once curiosity is triggered, the mind begins returning to the mystery again and again. What did he mean by that? Why did he react that way? What is he really thinking? In this way, attention grows even in absence. Machiavelli knew that influence is strongest when it operates silently, beneath the surface of awareness. The most effective strategies are rarely visible to those experiencing them. Controlled mystery works in the same way. It is not loud, it is not obvious, it is subtle. A glance that reveals confidence but not intention. A statement that hints at experience but avoids bragging. A moment of calm detachment when others expect emotional reaction. Each of these moments builds a psychological image in the observer's mind, and the mind always fills empty spaces with imagination, often exaggerating what might be hidden there. In the political world Machiavelli studied, this technique created fear and respect. In attraction, it creates curiosity and fascination, because people are not only drawn to what they understand, they are drawn even more strongly to what they do not yet understand. And the man who masters mystery does not chase attention. He becomes the question others cannot stop thinking about. There is a quiet law that governs human desire, a law that most people sense but rarely understand. It is the same law that makes rare diamonds more valuable than common stones. The same law that causes people to chase opportunities the moment they believe they might lose them. Scarcity. Long before modern psychology discovered this principle, the Renaissance philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli had already observed it in the courts of kings and rulers. He noticed that power did not belong to those who offered themselves freely. It belonged to those whose presence felt limited, selective, and difficult to obtain. People rarely chase what is constantly available. They chase what feels rare. This is one of the darkest truths about attraction, and one of the most misunderstood. Many men believe that giving more attention, more compliments, and more availability will increase a woman's interest in them. They assume generosity will create desire, but Machiavelli understood something different about human nature. When attention is unlimited, it becomes invisible. Imagine walking into a room where someone immediately gives you endless praise, endless time, endless validation. At first, it may feel pleasant, but very quickly, something strange begins to happen in the mind. The attention loses its weight. Because when something is always available, the brain stops assigning it value. Scarcity, on the other hand, creates psychological tension. When something valuable appears limited, the mind becomes alert. It begins to calculate, to pursue, to protect the opportunity before it disappears. This principle operates beneath conscious awareness. A woman may not deliberately think, "This man is scarce, therefore I must desire him." But she will feel the difference between a man whose attention is constantly chasing her and a man whose time, energy, and focus appear carefully chosen. One signals need, the other signals value. Machiavelli understood that rulers maintained authority by limiting access to themselves. A king did not meet everyone who requested his presence. His time was controlled, measured, and guarded. This limitation created prestige. The more difficult it was to gain his attention, the more meaningful that attention became. The same psychological pattern appears in human attraction. When a man gives unlimited emotional availability, he unintentionally communicates something dangerous. He signals that his time is not precious, that his attention is abundant, that his approval can be gained with little effort. But when a man lives a life where his attention is directed toward many priorities, his ambitions, his goals, his world, his presence becomes selective, not because he is playing games, but because he has a life that demands his energy. Scarcity is not created by pretending to be busy. It is created by actually having purpose beyond seeking validation. And this subtle difference changes everything. A man whose entire focus revolves around gaining a woman's attention quickly becomes predictable. His responses are immediate. His enthusiasm is constant. His availability never wavers. But the mind quickly adapts to constant patterns. What is predictable becomes ordinary. What is ordinary becomes unremarkable. Scarcity interrupts this pattern. A delayed response, a life filled with responsibilities, a sense that his attention must be earned rather than automatically given. These elements introduce uncertainty. And uncertainty creates interest. Machiavelli described something similar when discussing the loyalty of subjects. A ruler who gave everything too easily risked losing respect, but a ruler who rewarded carefully and selectively strengthened the value of every reward. Human emotions often follow the same rule. Attention that must be earned feels more meaningful than attention given without effort. Consider the psychological experience from the other side. When someone receives constant validation, their mind relaxes. There is no challenge, no uncertainty, no need to invest emotional effort. But when validation appears occasionally, when it arrives unexpectedly rather than constantly, the emotional reaction becomes stronger. The mind begins noticing those moments more intensely. This is not manipulation. It is simply how human psychology reacts to contrast and rarity. Scarcity amplifies perception. A simple compliment from someone whose approval is rare can feel more powerful than endless praise from someone who gives it freely. Because rarity transforms ordinary moments into significant ones, Machiavelli recognized that power is rarely about force. It is about controlling the conditions under which people value something. A ruler who controlled access to his favor controlled the loyalty of those around him. In attraction, a man who controls the distribution of his attention controls the emotional weight of that attention. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means understanding that your attention has value. When that value is given carefully, it becomes meaningful. When it is scattered endlessly, it dissolves into background noise. Scarcity also communicates independence. A man who is constantly available suggests that his life lacks competing priorities. But a man whose time is limited suggests ambition, purpose, and movement. These signals operate beneath conscious awareness, but they shape perception in powerful ways. Because attraction is rarely logical, it is emotional, and emotions respond strongly to signals of value, rarity, and importance. The man who lives as though his time is precious communicates something powerful without saying a word. He suggests that his world is already full, that his attention is not given automatically, that his presence must be chosen carefully. And when attention feels chosen rather than desperate, its emotional impact multiplies. Scarcity transforms ordinary interaction into something far more compelling. It forces the mind to notice, to appreciate, to wonder. Because the human mind instinctively protects what it believes it might lose. Human emotions rarely remain loyal to stability. As strange as it sounds, the mind does not become deeply attached through constant comfort. It becomes attached through emotional contrast, through moments that rise and fall, advance and retreat, warmth and distance. Long before modern psychology studied emotional reinforcement, the Renaissance strategist Niccolò Machiavelli observed this same phenomenon in politics, loyalty, and influence. Machiavelli noticed that rulers who treated their followers with constant softness often lost authority. But rulers who created a balance of reward and challenge maintained control over attention and loyalty. It was not cruelty that preserved their influence. It was unpredictability. A follower who could not fully predict the ruler's next reaction remained emotionally alert. He watched more carefully, listened more closely, and invested more of his mental energy trying to understand the ruler's intentions. This principle may sound political, but it quietly appears in attraction as well. The human mind becomes deeply engaged when emotions experience contrast. When warmth is followed by distance, when interest is followed by independence, when attention appears and then momentarily withdraws. This rhythm creates psychological tension, and tension keeps the mind invested. Most men approach attraction with a simple strategy: constant approval. They show admiration, agreement, enthusiasm, and reassurance at every possible moment. They believe consistency will create comfort, and comfort will create attraction. But the mind quickly adapts to emotional patterns. When someone behaves in the exact same way every time, the brain stops paying close attention. Predictability creates emotional calm, but calm rarely produces fascination. Machiavelli understood that the mind becomes most alert when it senses variation. A ruler might reward loyalty with generosity one day, but challenge that same loyalty the next, not to punish, but to prevent emotional complacency. This shifting dynamic kept followers attentive, engaged, and psychologically connected to the ruler's approval. In attraction, a similar rhythm can appear in subtle ways. Imagine a conversation where a man shows genuine interest in a woman's thoughts, listens carefully, responds with humor, and allows a moment of connection to form. The atmosphere becomes warm, comfortable, even exciting. But instead of clinging to that moment or desperately extending it, he shifts his attention naturally. Perhaps he introduces a playful challenge. Perhaps he briefly focuses on something else in the environment. Perhaps he allows a pause in conversation instead of rushing to fill every silence. Suddenly, the emotional temperature changes slightly. Not enough to create discomfort, but enough to create contrast. This contrast causes the mind to wake up again. Because the brain begins asking a subtle question, what changed? The moment interest begins to fade into predictability, emotional variation restores curiosity. It reminds the other person that the interaction is alive, dynamic, and evolving rather than static. Machiavelli saw this clearly in human loyalty. People often believe they want permanent stability, but their attention is captured by experiences that fluctuate. When a follower received rewards only occasionally, those rewards carried greater emotional weight. When approval was never guaranteed, its arrival became meaningful. This is the psychology behind push and pull. Push does not mean rejection or cruelty. It simply means introducing a small element of independence or challenge into the interaction. Pull does not mean overwhelming affection. It means allowing moments of warmth and connection to appear naturally. Together, these movements create rhythm, and rhythm keeps emotions engaged. Consider how stories capture human attention. A story where every moment is calm quickly becomes dull, but a story that moves between tension and resolution becomes gripping. The reader wants to know what happens next because the emotional experience keeps shifting. Human relationships often follow the same pattern. When interactions remain perfectly predictable, the mind stops investing effort. But when interactions contain variation, curiosity remains alive. The brain becomes attentive to the emotional signals, trying to interpret their meaning. This does not require manipulation. In fact, the most effective form of push and pull happens naturally when a person is emotionally balanced. Someone who has a full life outside the interaction will naturally shift their attention between connection and independence. They will enjoy the moment but not cling to it. They will engage deeply but remain comfortable stepping away. This natural movement creates contrast, and contrast creates intrigue. Machiavelli believed that influence rarely comes from constant force. Instead, it comes from controlling the emotional environment in which people operate. By alternating between generosity and challenge, a ruler could maintain attention without appearing desperate for loyalty. In attraction, the same principle quietly shapes emotional investment. When a woman experiences moments of genuine connection followed by moments of independence, the interaction begins to feel dynamic rather than predictable. Her mind remains engaged because it cannot fully settle into routine. She begins observing more closely, not out of confusion but out of curiosity. Why did he respond that way? Why did he smile at that moment? Why did he suddenly become quiet? Each variation invites the mind to interpret meaning, and the more the mind interprets, the more emotionally involved it becomes. Push and pull also prevents emotional imbalance. When someone constantly seeks approval, they gradually place themselves in a position of dependency. But when moments of connection are balanced with moments of independence, both individuals remain on equal emotional ground. The interaction becomes an exchange rather than a pursuit. This balance carries a quiet confidence. It communicates that connection is welcome, but not desperately required, and confidence, when combined with emotional variation, creates a powerful psychological presence. Machiavelli would describe this as maintaining control over perception, not through dominance but through strategic unpredictability. Because the human mind cannot ignore what it cannot fully predict, it returns to the puzzle again and again, trying to understand the pattern behind the behavior. And the more it searches for that pattern, the deeper its attention becomes.